Elias Thorne was a man who lived on the periphery of the extraordinary. He was an architect, not of buildings, but of algorithms, intricate, elegant mathematical structures designed to solve the world's most pressing problems. He worked out of a small, cramped apartment in the city, its walls covered in whiteboards scrawled with equations and flowcharts. To him, the digital world was far more tangible and beautiful than the physical one. He saw elegance in code, artistry in logic, and a kind of profound, spiritual grace in a perfectly optimized system. He was also, by all accounts, a man who paid no mind to the physical world. His hair was a perpetually disheveled mop, his clothes a rotation of the same few t-shirts, and his most prized possession was a pair of old worn-out shoes. They were scuffed at the toes, the laces were frayed, and the left sole had a deep, ragged tear in it, a gash that widened with every step he took. He had fixed it with a generous application of duct tape more times than he could count, the silver tape a stark, unashamed scar against the faded black leather. To Elias, they were the most comfortable shoes he had ever owned, an extension of his own steady, unpretentious gait. He saw no reason to replace them. That, however, was a perspective not shared by the rest of the world. Tonight the world was a very different place. It was a place of polished marble, of whispering silk and glinting diamonds, of starched white shirts and shoes that shone with a mirror-like gleam. The setting was the annual Innovators Gala, an event so exclusive that its invitation was a golden ticket to the upper echelons of the global tech industry. Elias was there because of one of his algorithms, a new, revolutionary piece of AI he called Nexus, which was designed to predict and mitigate supply chain disruptions on a global scale. It was a world-changing idea, a thing of true beauty and profound utility, but Elias felt like an alien in the gleaming ballroom. He stood near a towering ficus tree, a flute of cheap champagne in his hand, feeling the quiet hum of conversation as a foreign, incomprehensible language. He watched the polished crowd, investors with knowing smiles, startup founders with practiced pitches, and the well-heeled sons and daughters of old money, draped in designer clothes. He knew that somewhere in this room was Sir Alistair Finch, the legendary venture capitalist, a man who had built empires from nothing and whose approval was the holy grail of every entrepreneur. Elias had been told that Finch himself had requested to meet him, which explained his presence tonight. The thought of it made his heart pound, a wild, untamed thing against his ribs. But the pounding wasn't the only thing. It was a new sound, a sound he felt rather than heard at first. A low, throaty chuckle that seemed to ripple through the air. He glanced over and saw a trio of men and a woman, all in their late 20s, sipping cocktails and watching him. Their clothes were impossibly expensive, their faces a carefully constructed mask of casual superiority. One of the men, with a sharp angular face and a blazer the color of a stormy sea, gestured subtly towards Elias's feet. "Oh, look at that," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by those nearby. A low-pitched stage whisper designed for maximum humiliation. "Is that a new trend? Post-apocalyptic footwear?" The others laughed. It wasn't a hearty, joyful sound. It was a brittle, sharp sound, like glass cracking. The woman, with a laugh that sounded like a tinkling bell, leaned in. "Is he homeless? I thought this was a private event." Elias felt a hot wave of shame wash over him. He wanted to melt into the floor, to become invisible. He looked down at his shoes, at the duct tape, at the telltale flapping of the sole. The comfort he had always felt from them evaporated, replaced by a searing, public embarrassment. He felt a deep, wrenching regret that he hadn't spent a small portion of his meager savings on a new pair. "I'm sure he's a genius," another man quipped, a smirk playing on his lips. "Only a genius would be so far ahead of the curve. He's probably pioneering a new form of sustainable shoe repair." The laughter swelled, attracting more attention. People began to turn their heads, their smiles fading into curiosity, then into a kind of detached amusement. The laughter of the quartet was no longer a private joke. It was a public spectacle, and Elias was its unwilling star. He felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. He was a man of logic and reason, but in this moment, logic provided no solace. The elegant equations in his mind scattered like dust. All he could think about were his shoes, his flawed, flapping, ugly shoes. The torment continued for what felt like an eternity. He was a spectacle, an oddity, the living embodiment of everything the glittering crowd saw as beneath them. The laughter grew louder and more confident, as they saw that their target was not fighting back. The storm-faced man took a step closer, a cruel smile on his face. "Listen, buddy," he said, the false intimacy in his voice more insulting than any direct insult. "I'm just trying to help. There's a decent shoe store down the street. Maybe you should take a break from ... whatever this is, and get yourself a pair of real shoes. You know, ones that don't look like they've been run over by a lawnmower." The joke landed with a fresh wave of laughter. Elias's hands trembled. He wanted to speak, to explain, to defend himself, but the words were stuck in his throat, a lump of bitter ash. He felt a profound sense of injustice. He had come here with a solution that could save millions, a piece of work that had consumed years of his life, and all they could see was the tear in his shoe. Just as the laughter reached its crescendo, a new voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it had a weight and authority that silenced every other sound, as if someone had flicked a master switch. "What is so funny?" The voice belonged to a man who had been sitting quietly in a plush velvet chair near the back of the room, observing. He was an older man, with a shock of silver hair and eyes that were as sharp and intelligent as a hawk's. He was dressed in a simple, impeccably tailored suit that seemed to fit him as a second skin. This was Sir Alistair Finch. He was a man who rarely spoke at such events, preferring to watch and listen, and his sudden interruption caused a ripple of shocked silence. The storm-faced man, who had been mid-chuckle, froze, the cruel smile on his face slowly melting into a look of panic. "Sir Finch," he stammered, "we were just ... making a joke. It was just a bit of levity." Sir Finch did not smile. He pushed himself to his feet, a slow, deliberate movement that held the attention of every person in the room. His gaze swept over the group of bullies, then over the silent, watching crowd. His eyes were cold and unblinking. "A joke," he repeated, his voice a low, resonant baritone. "Humiliation for sport. That is not levity, young man. That is cowardice." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. The storm-faced man and his friends looked as if they had been struck. Their swagger had completely vanished, replaced by a desperate, palpable fear. Sir Finch then turned his attention to Elias. His expression softened slightly, a glint of something like understanding in his eyes. He walked slowly, purposefully, across the polished floor, his own expensive shoes making no sound on the marble. He stopped directly in front of Elias, his presence a powerful, protective force. He glanced down at the duct-taped shoe, his gaze lingering for a moment, not with mockery, but with what seemed to be a thoughtful curiosity. "Elias Thorne," Sir Finch said, his voice now a warm and respectful murmur. "I have been waiting for this moment. Your work on Nexus is, frankly, breathtaking." The name hung in the air, and a new ripple, this time of murmurs and whispers, went through the crowd. Nexus, the new supply chain AI. The industry had been abuzz with rumors of it for months, but the identity of its creator had remained a closely guarded secret. "This is the man," Sir Finch continued, raising his voice so it carried across the ballroom. "This is the man who has spent the last 5 years of his life in a room filled with whiteboards, hunched over a laptop, refining a piece of software that will save entire industries from collapsing. A piece of software that will ensure food gets to the hungry, medicine gets to the sick, and that the global economy can withstand the shocks of our unpredictable world." He turned back to the crowd, his face a mask of stern disapproval. "Do you know how a man like this works? He doesn't spend his time worrying about a tailored suit or a pair of polished shoes. He doesn't waste a single moment on superficiality. He is a man of singular focus, of true dedication. Every hour, every minute, every ounce of his energy is poured into his work." "And yes," Sir Finch said, looking pointedly at the storm-faced man, "that includes the money he makes. He doesn't spend it on frivolous things. He pours it back into his research, into his servers, into his relentless pursuit of a solution that will benefit us all." His gaze returned to Elias's shoe. "This shoe," he said, gesturing to the duct tape, "is not a sign of poverty. It is a sign of sacrifice. It is a testament to the fact that his mind is on matters infinitely more important than fashion or status. It is a badge of honor." The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. The laughter was gone, replaced by a chilling, collective shame. The quartet of bullies looked mortified, their faces pale and their eyes fixed on the floor. One of them, a woman in a dazzling red dress, even had tears in her eyes. "We have become a society," Sir Finch continued, his voice losing some of its sternness and gaining a sorrowful, disappointed tone, that values the appearance of success over the substance of it. "We look at the gilded cage and mock the bird with ruffled feathers, not realizing that the bird is the one who can actually sing." He took a step back, and his gaze finally found Elias's again, this time with a genuine, heartfelt warmth. "Young man, you are a rare and precious thing. The world needs more people like you." Then, he turned on his heel and walked directly towards the storm-faced man. The man, who had been trying to shrink into the crowd, looked up, his eyes wide with fear. "I know your father, Mark," Sir Finch said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's a good man. He worked hard to get where he is. He would be deeply disappointed to see his son treat a genius with such disrespect. Get out of here, all of you, now." The group, thoroughly chastised, scurried out of the ballroom, their faces a mixture of humiliation and shock. Sir Finch watched them go, then turned to the rest of the room. The crowd, which moments before had been a sea of detached amusement, now looked at Elias with a newfound awe and respect. Suddenly, a woman in a business suit approached Elias, a genuine smile on her face. "Mr. Thorne," she said, holding out her hand. "My name is Alina. I'm with Aurora Ventures. I just want to say..." I'm so sorry for what happened, and I'm incredibly impressed. We'd love to schedule a meeting with you next week to discuss your work. Another man, older and with kind eyes, stepped forward. I'm with Transglobal Logistics. Your software, it's exactly what we've been looking for. Please, let's talk. A line began to form. Elias, the man who had been a pariah just minutes ago, was now the center of the universe. The tide had turned completely. The air, which had been thick with ridicule, was now buzzing with a kind of electric excitement. They no longer saw his shoes. They saw the mind that wore them, the genius that they had almost dismissed. Sir Finch remained beside him, a silent guardian, until the initial wave of new admirers had subsided. Then, he put a gentle hand on Elias's shoulder and guided him away from the crowd, towards a quiet corner. You handled that with grace, son, Sir Finch said, his voice quiet. Most people would have lashed out. You stood your ground, even in your shame. That's a sign of a strong character. Elias, still slightly dazed, looked at him. Thank you, Sir Finch. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, Finch said with a smile. Just listen. I have a proposal for you. I was going to offer you an investment, but after tonight, I think something more is in order. My foundation, the Finch Institute, is dedicated to supporting the kind of raw, unfiltered genius that you represent. We don't care about quarterly reports or market valuations. We care about ideas that change the world. He paused and looked at Elias, a deep sincerity in his gaze. I'd like to fund you completely, no strings attached. A full, comprehensive grant that allows you to work without a single financial worry. I want you to build whatever you want to build. Your work is too important to be shackled by spreadsheets and investor presentations. Elias's heart soared, but he was still grounded enough to be practical. But, what about the business side of things? My software has to get to market. It has to be scaled up. That's where I come in, Sir Finch said. We'll build a team around you, the best in the world. They will handle the business. Your only job will be to create, to innovate, to dream. You'll never have to worry about a presentation or a board meeting again. Your only job is to be you, Elias. Just be you. Tears welled in Elias's eyes. It was more than an offer. It was a validation of his entire life's work, of his unconventional way of being. He looked down at his shoes, at the tattered sole held together by the silver tape. He no longer saw a source of shame. He saw a symbol of his journey, of the long, lonely hours, of the sacrifices he had made. The duct tape, which had once felt like a brand of mockery, now felt like a mark of distinction. Sir Finch followed his gaze. Keep them, he said softly. They'll remind you of where you came from. And when the world starts to tell you that you need to be something you're not, just look down at them and remember the man you are. Elias stood there, a quiet, brilliant man with a torn shoe and a new future stretching out before him. The ballroom around him was still buzzing, but the sound had changed. The shallow laughter was gone, replaced by a deep and profound respect. The world had laughed at his broken shoes, but it was Sir Alistair Finch, who had stood up and reminded everyone that true value is unfound on the surface. It is found in the depths of the mind, the courage of the spirit, and the quiet, unassuming genius that a simple, duct-taped shoe can hide. From that day on, the duct-taped shoe would become a symbol not of poverty, but of profound wealth, the kind that money could never buy.